I knew there were bad ideas, then there was what they were sending me to do. Recon into uncharted territory of a system that had been suspiciously quiet. That alone was enough to tell any pilot something was wrong. On top of it, they wanted me in the Ghost. Sure, the Ghost was amazing, a black, angular thing more shadow than ship, with tech so newfangled half of it was probably cobbled together with hope and alien duct tape. But that was the problem. Half of it was probably not going to work. And they wanted me to take it somewhere filled with potential hostiles because I was the only pilot dumb enough, or good enough, depending on who you asked, to maybe get back alive. At least that was how Command figured it. Problem was, they tended to forget just how stubborn a former farm boy turned combat pilot could be. All right, Cooper, my tech. Jimmy Wynn was the only spot of color in the start prep room, sporting a bright Hawaiian shirt under his white coveralls. The kid never quite got the memo on military seriousness. At least he was good with machines. Remember, keep calm, silent, and unless you absolutely have to, no fancy flying. That baby can outmaneuver anything the council's ever put together, but the second you light up their radar like a Christmas tree, you're toast. Like I don't know that already, I grunted, pulling on the flight suit. It was skin tight, less about comfort, more about keeping the G-forces from scrambling my brains. The helmet came last. Its weight always made me brace before I slipped it on, the world winking out as the smart visor settled over my eyes. You got the pre-flight done? I'm guessing no based on that guilty look. Ran all the diagnostics. Everything's green, I swear. It's just. Jimmy rubbed the back of his neck, the eternal picture of an overworked techie who'd been up too many nights listening to engineers argue over whose idea was best. There's that adaptive cloaking module thingy. Makes even me nervous. They grew that crystal in a lab, Cap. A lab. Look kid, I reached out, giving his shoulder a reassuring, if slightly too vigorous, pat. They grow tomatoes in labs now too, doesn't mean they'll bite back. Just get me buttoned up. Command's already breathing down my neck to launch. I gave him my best attempt at a smile, but from the way Jimmy's eyes widened, it probably looked more like a grimace. The walk to the hangar bay was a long one. Each sterile hallway brought me closer to the Ghost, and further from the safe, bright world of the base. Command would brief me later, show me fuzzy images of unknown ships and sensor readouts that meant nothing to a pilot, but I was already starting the mental calculations. How long a burn to reach the target zone? How much fuel to reserve for the return? What to do if things went sideways, as they often did on jobs like this. They put her in the far bay, a single spotlight cutting through the darkness to bathe the Ghost in harsh white. Some poet type back at HQ had decided that it was the perfect name, a whisper of existence, near invisible, the ultimate recon ship. She looked like a nightmare. All hard edges and weird angles, the matte black paint seemed to suck up the light around her. This thing wasn't built with dogfights in mind. No flashy paint job, no comforting bulge of missile pods. The Ghost was designed to do one thing, and one thing well, disappear. You've got clearance for launch, Captain Cooper. Good hunting. The disembodied voice in my ear was controlled, cool and detached, the polar opposite to the nervous energy crackling through me. I keyed the comm, roger that, control. Ghost away. The canopy slid shut silently, sealing me in a world of dials, readouts, and my own reflection staring back at me in the black glass of the visor. This wasn't like taking one of the Hornets out for a patrol, this felt heavier. Final. A soft rumble shivered through the Ghost as the engine spooled up. It always amazed me, the sheer power caged in such a small space. The tech specs would speak of thrust ratios and plasma drives, but they never quite prepared you for how it felt in the gut, a caged beast desperate for release. Engines at flight power, Captain. Jimmy's voice was tinny over the speakers, a last tether to the world I knew. I took a breath and reached for the throttle. Here we go. The Ghost surged forward, not with a lurch, but a smooth, unstoppable glide. The catapult system on the carrier always gave me a headache, the shockwaves jarring against the careful balance of a pilot's inner ear. But the Ghost, she was grace-given form. In moments, the carrier was shrinking, a grey sliver against the star-studded vastness of space. The comms crackled, Command barking out coordinates and the all-important reminder of radio silence. Then, silence. Just me and the comforting hum of my ship. The first few hours were uneventful, a pilot's word for the soul-crushing boredom of deep space. The Ghost systems kept me busy. She was a temperamental machine, the experimental bits always sulking if you didn't pay enough attention. Somewhere out there was the edge of the disputed system, and beyond it, the reason Command was so desperate for information. Space has a way of disorienting you. It's beautiful, sure, 1,000 pinpricks of light against endless black. But after a while, it all starts to look the same. The readouts scrolled before my eyes, the relentless language of navigation and sensor data. Boredom settled into a dull throb behind my eyes. Time to wake things up. Ghost, run calibration sequence Alpha 5. Let's see what this baby can really do. The ghost didn't so much respond as acquiesce. My stomach lurched as the familiar inertia of steady flight warped into a series of micro-adjustments. We danced, my ship and I. One moment the stars streaked into lines, the next we pivoted on an axis that shouldn't exist. Each maneuver was a conversation, the ship's systems responding to the slightest shift in my grip, a silent ballet in the vacuum. Maybe Jimmy was right to be nervous. With tech like this, you didn't fly the ghost as much as become part of it, your senses extending into cold metal and crackling energy fields. It was exhilarating. It was also just plain stupid. One miscalculation, one overtaxed system, and I'd be another smear of wreckage against some nameless asteroid. But in that moment, none of that mattered. It was the rush, the feeling of being more than human, that kept a lot of us coming back for more. Until it didn't anymore. The comm system, silent for so long, erupted in a shriek of static that near deafened me. I fumbled for the volume dial, eyes frantically scanning for an alert light, some indication of what was going on. Ghost to command. Ghost to command, do you read? My voice sounded small, lost in the vastness that now felt claustrophobic. Nothing but the lingering crackle of interference. That wasn't a comm glitch, that was the sound of someone jamming my signal, and they weren't being subtle about it. I punched the thruster controls, sending the ghost into a roll. No alert blared from the system, which meant no missiles tracking me, not yet at least. But if they could jam my comms, they could see me. That damned adaptive cloak must have finally given up on whatever crystal voodoo powered it. Time wasn't just ticking now, it was detonating in my chest. I had to get word back to command, had to tell them they weren't facing some backwater smugglers here, but something with the tech to black out a state-of-the-art stealth ship. That little stunt with the calibration sequence? Yeah, probably gave away my position like a beacon. Stupid. So damn stupid. My fingers danced over the sensor controls, pushing the ghost systems to their limits in a desperate attempt to map my surroundings. Whatever was out there was cloaked as well as I was, maybe better considering I wasn't the one broadcasting my position to the entire sector. There. A flicker on the edge of long range, something big, a group of signals headed my way. I killed the thrusters, letting the ghost drift in the hopes that I'd blend into the debris field I'd just been zipping through. No use announcing myself twice, right? Every instinct screamed at me to burn thrusters, head back to the safety of the carrier. But a prickling sensation at the base of my neck told me I wouldn't make it. They were already too close. My job now wasn't to get home, but to buy time for the others, to make sure they weren't caught as blindsided as I was. My head pounded in time with the frantic blip, blip, blip of the proximity alert. They were close. Too close. Shapes materialized out of the darkness, 3 of them. Sleek, predatory things with a shimmer at their edges that could have been cloaking tech, or just the distortion of starlight. Odds were against me. Spectacularly so. But this wasn't my first rodeo. The ghost wasn't armed to the teeth, but she wasn't defenseless either. I flipped the weapons panel cover, a surge of grim satisfaction as the targeting systems flared to life. If you want to dance, you got one. The words were bravado, meant to drown out the gnawing fear. The comm crackled again, but this time it wasn't static. A voice cut through, low and guttural, filtered through some translator program that struggled to make sense of the harsh syllables. Human vessel, surrender. Resistance is illogical. Yeah, no. I triggered a burst from the comms array, short and sharp, a coded distress signal that was hopefully as untraceable as the rest of the ghost. With luck, some listening post would pick it up, a faint echo of trouble. Not enough to save me, but enough to alert command. Logic, huh? I kept my voice light, buying time. Engaging with them might keep their guns cold, for a minute at least. Let me guess. Big on efficiency, low on surprises, that kind of thing. More crackling, then the translated voice, irritated now. Your defiance serves no purpose. Our calculations show. I cut him off with a laugh. It came out harsher than intended, tinged with desperation. Calculations. That figures. All right, Mr. Spock, here's a calculation for you. How many seconds until I introduce you to my friend Mr. Plasma Torpedo? Silence hung heavy. I pushed the advantage, warning shots free. Next one's gonna leave a mark. The lead ship responded by doing nothing. Their formation didn't shift, no evasive maneuvers, just hung there, a silent threat. The bluff was working, for now. The Ghost might be a flying prototype, but they had no way of knowing what she carried. The lead ship flickered, warped for a moment, then sharpened back into focus. Another trick of their cloaking tech, or they were messing with my sensors. A warrior's spirit, the voice crackled, almost grudging. It is unexpected. We misjudged you. That set off alarms. They hadn't come for recon, or even capture. I was the catch of the day, the one they were here to eliminate. The realization sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through me. I had value, and that meant, just maybe, there was a way out of this. Well, wouldn't be the first time, I countered, going for casual even as my hands tightened on the controls. My eyes darted across the readouts. Power reserves were high. The Ghost could maintain this cloak and dagger game for hours. If I played it right. Your value is in cooperation. The voice was smoother, taking on a bargaining tone. Your technology is of interest to us. Aid us, and your world will be spared. My stomach churned. Traitor wasn't a word in any pilot's vocabulary, but survival was. I stalled, let my voice take on a considering note. And how do I know you'll keep your side of the deal? A soft humming echoed off the ship's hull. Took me a moment to realize it was the alien version of a laugh. Because you have no other option, human. They weren't wrong. But they weren't entirely right either. Options existed as long as the Ghost was running and my heart was beating. Now, to figure out which option would get me the hell out of there. I triggered a sensor burst. Nothing fancy, just a standard system sweep, the kind used 1,000 times a day for navigation. But I had a hunch, a desperate gamble based on half-remembered tech specs. Warning. Jimmy Wynn's voice blared through my helmet speakers a few weeks ago, his usual unflappable demeanor cracking slightly. The cloaking module, it's not just adaptive, it's, well, the engineers call it a resonance system. Means it can mimic other cloaking fields if it's calibrated just right. Bingo. The Ghost shivered around me as I flooded the adaptive cloak with raw power, overloading it. The readout for stealth field integrity flickered wildly, the system whining in protest. But there was a secondary effect, a spike on the sensor grid. My three friends flared bright, their cloaking fields momentarily disrupted by the feedback. You're jamming them. Jimmy again, the kid sounded awestruck. Now was my chance. I slammed the throttle forward. The Ghost surged, not in a straight escape trajectory, but weaving erratically between the alien ships. Their systems were struggling to re-establish their camouflage, making them blind, and on my home turf, blind meant vulnerable. A blossom of crimson bloomed against the black void, one of the enemy ships finally regaining its senses, weapons flaring hot and angry. The shot sliced past my port wing, close enough that I swore I felt the heat. Time warped. Years of drills, the blurring madness of dogfights, all of it kicked in with cold calculation. I banked hard, pulling a gut-wrenching turn that would have liquefied breakfast if I'd eaten anything that morning. The targeting reticule danced over the two remaining ships, still disoriented. My chance. Got you, you suckers, I yelled, the glee a little too manic, a little too tinged with the knowledge I was a single hit from oblivion. I squeezed the triggers. The plasma torpedoes streaked from the Ghost's underbelly, not dumb fire missiles, but smart ones with just enough AI to adjust mid-flight. Direct hits were unlikely, but I didn't need them to be. The torpedoes detonated short, exploding in a blinding flash that rippled against the enemy's disrupted cloak fields. For a few precious seconds, both ships were starkly outlined against the void. 3 targets split into dozens as holographic defense systems flared, scrambling to deflect a phantom attack. It was enough. The Ghost twisted and spun, a shadow among shadows, using the chaos to gain distance. Then, with a final burst of speed, I was past them, streaking for open space. The enemy comms exploded with a fury of alien squawks. Too late. My sensors showed them regaining coordination, turning in pursuit, but I had the momentum, and I wasn't being subtle anymore. Course set for the jump point, I needed to get the hell home. Jimmy. Get me a comm link, highest priority you can manage. My voice was shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting as hard as a punch to the gut. The kid's voice stammered back, "See Captain," signals still scrambled, they're blanketing the area. Patch me through anyway. Blind broadcast, let's hope someone hears me. I swallowed, forcing the words out. This is Captain Cooper, Ghost Actual. We have hostile contact in disputed sector. Repeat, hostile contact. Tech level significant, advise immediate. My words were cut off as the ghost lurched violently. My vision spun, the ship tilting sickeningly as alarms blared. Damage control readouts turned an angry red. They got a shot in. Aft stabilizers are down. Cloak field failing. Jimmy's voice was pitched high with fear. I fought the ghost, struggling to compensate, to keep her from spiraling away into an uncontrolled drift. Get the drive spooling for emergency jump. Now. The whine of the engines changed pitch, rising with a desperate scream of overtaxed systems. My vision tunneled, the stars outside smearing into streaks. They had me. Then, a miracle. A single crisp line cut through the comm interference. Ghost actual, this is command. Hold position for extraction. Repeat, hold position. What? Extraction? Here? It made no sense, but it was a lifeline, and I wasn't about to let go. Can't hold. I'm cloaked, but not for long. Get me out of here. It took everything to keep my voice from cracking. A pause, and then, faintly, a new voice. Understood, ghost. We're painting your target. Switch to frequency. The ghost trembled as the comm signal locked onto a new frequency, a tight beam burst that must have been cutting through the alien jamming with surgical precision. Now my sensor display came alive, fresh contacts appearing like magic. No, not magic, backup. Big backup. Hang tight, Cooper, the cavalry's here. Jimmy again, his voice almost gleeful. And it was. 3 of our heavy cruisers materialized from the void, the familiar wedge shapes a sight for sore eyes. Their guns were blazing, not at me, but at the alien ships, drawing their fire, buying me precious seconds. Jump drive ready. Jimmy's shout was barely audible over the roar of alarms. Punch it. And just like that, the stars warped, the universe compressed, and the jump was rough, the aftermath worse. My stomach roiled in protest at the sudden, violent transition. Alarms screamed in my ears, warnings flashing urgently on the display as the ghost shuddered from the strain. Report. I barked, fighting the nausea rising in my throat. Cloak modules fried, sir. Jimmy's voice was tight. Port stabilizer is non-responsive, hull breaches in sections 2 and 5, and... Well, Captain, she's held together by spit and prayers right now. Not exactly reassuring, but then again, the ghost wasn't designed for a graceful exit. Can we seal the breaches? Auto systems are working on it, but life support is touch and go. He paused, a note of hesitation in his voice. Sir, we're in no shape to take another hit. That meant no backup if things went wrong again, and if my encounter a little while ago was any indication, things definitely had a tendency to go wrong. I scrubbed at my face, exhaustion and adrenaline making every thought feel like it was moving through mud. Get me a status update from command. Aye, Captain. Jimmy's response was swift, a hint of his usual confidence returning. It calmed something in me, the familiar rhythm of pilot and tech working in sync, even in the face of utter chaos. A few tense minutes later, I had my answer. We weren't going home. Not anytime soon. Command was sending a rapid repair and retrieval crew, but it would take hours to arrive, and we were still deep in potentially hostile territory. The cruisers that had swooped in for my dramatic exit were now engaging the alien ships in a full-blown firefight out on the system's edge. They'd buy us time, but not indefinitely. Well, Jimmy, I forced a grin that felt about as genuine as a politician's campaign promise. Looks like we're tourists for a little while longer. Get me anything that can pass for long-range scans, and let's see what else this neighborhood has to offer. The next several hours blurred together in a haze of damage reports and whispered curses. Keeping the ghost from falling apart was a full-time job, her systems throwing a temper tantrum after the abuse they'd been through. On the plus side, the scans revealed a surprisingly dense asteroid belt nearby, a potential hiding spot if we could limp that far. Captain, you ain't gonna like this, Jimmy's voice cut through my tense focus. My head jerked up, fingers already dancing across the sensor console. Let me guess, more of our new best friends. Worse, he sighed, Command's lost contact with the cruisers. Whatever's out there took them down, or they pulled back further than our comms can reach. The news hit me like an icy wave. We were alone. The realization sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the ghost's failing life support. We were adrift in enemy territory with a barely functional ship and no hope of rescue. Focus on those asteroids, Jimmy, I forced an even tone into my voice. We couldn't afford to panic. Anything that might shield us from prying eyes long enough to patch this flying bucket together? Working on it, sir. Jimmy's response was subdued, the usual spark of defiance flickering low. We drifted towards the belt, the ghost a wounded bird seeking shelter. My mind raced, a desperate search for any option that didn't involve a fiery death amidst an unforgiving void. We were outgunned, outmatched, and rapidly running out of miracles. The ghost shuddered intermittently, protesting every tiny course correction, but she held. My vision blurred, the lack of sleep catching up to me with a vengeance. I blinked hard, fighting the darkness creeping into the edges of my sight. This was how pilots died, not in a blaze of glory, but from sheer exhaustion forcing a single, fatal mistake. "Captain!" Jimmy's shout jolted me back. "I've found something. A big one. Cavernous even. Big enough to hide the ghost, at least for a little while. Get us there. Now." Navigating the asteroid field was nerve-wracking. The crippled ghost was no longer graceful, limping from rock to rock, relying on short-range thrusters in a desperate game of celestial pinball. Once, twice, we grazed the unforgiving surface, sending sparks flying and the ship groaning ominously. But the asteroid loomed closer, its craggy surface promising a temporary sanctuary. "We're gonna have to squeeze in tight, sir. I hope you like spelunking," Jimmy said, worry lacing his voice. "Just focus on not crashing us, kid." "I'll handle the claustrophobia," I retorted, a weak attempt to lighten the mood. The cavern entrance was barely visible, a ragged gash against the surface. We nudged the ghost in, the hull scraping ominously against the rock. Darkness closed in on us, the ship's failing lights barely cutting through the gloom. "Seal the entrance," I ordered, voice hoarse. "Once that's done, kill the systems. Everything that draws power." "Aye, Captain." In the dim glow of the console, I could just make out Jimmy's hunched form, fingers moving with the precision of long habit. Minutes later, the ghost went silent, cloaked not by advanced tech, but by the unyielding blackness of the cavern. Finally, some peace and quiet, I managed a weak chuckle. "Sir, I'd want to hold off on that," Jimmy said, concern tinging his voice. "Looks like we're not alone in here." I followed his gaze. My blood ran cold. Glowing eyes pierced the darkness. Not one set, but dozens. My hand twitched towards the sidearm I hadn't worn in years, but a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye stopped me. Whatever those glowing eyes belonged to, they weren't alone. Shapes shifted in the shadows, sinuous forms that were too large, too agile to be anything I recognized. Jimmy let out a soft gasp beside me. We were caught between the relentless void and whatever lurked in this forsaken cave. It was clear our troubles were far from over, and the enemy might not even be the aliens anymore. This was a cliffhanger of the most terrifying sort, promising a desperate struggle for survival against unknown odds, a thrilling launchpad for the next episode of this epic sci-fi adventure.